Hello there, this is day 10 and I'm James. This is trying to become a famous author, and today I just want to talk about the most recent thing I've read, which is Number One Chinese Restaurant by Lillian Li. And yeah, this was one I hadn't heard of the author before. I just got grabbed by this really cool cover. So I saw it in the library and felt like I had to pick it up basically. So I've been reading that. It hasn't taken me too long to read. I mean, it's been a pretty busy week and a half, but I've still got it down the hatch pretty quick because it was a pretty gripping read. I think the main thing I liked about reading this was just how vivid all the characters are. I think Lee does a good job of making their personalities stand out in their dialogue. You kind of get a sense for the characters that are more sort of soft and tender compared to the characters that are more critical of themselves and others, and a bit more like coarse, and that comes through pretty much in all of their dialogue. I think one of the strengths is I could pretty much read any dialogue, I think, and without being told who says it, know who speaks it, just because of how characteristic each of their speaking styles is. I thought that was really strong. And also another reason why the characters come through so strongly is they all have these really well-developed backgrounds. It's like every single character has a history with the other characters, and it forms this very interesting web. And that's nice to learn about throughout the novel, I think, knowing that there's that level of depth, and there's always a little bit more to uncover, but also the network between the characters strengthening itself as it goes on. Without giving away too much, it is around sort of an insurance claim and how characters' lives change because of the shutting down of this one restaurant that in some way they're all related to, either because they personally work there as a staff member, or they're the manager, or their parent works there, or their parent works there and now they work there too. So everyone is sort of involved in this pretty good web system, and you learn more about that as the novel progresses. So yeah, the characterization came through really strongly. I think one of the potential flaws, I would say, is that every chapter, even as you get very close to the end, has a lot of this very characterizing exposition. You learn pretty much throughout the whole story, you're learning about these characters' backstories. And so if I was to open the book up to any part, and it perhaps would be like a dialogue scene, or like it'd be maybe something in the restaurant, the way it flicks into the characters' minds and tells you about what they're thinking and how that relates to some past event that happened between them, that almost feels as though it should be earlier, because it comes as if you don't know the characters yet. But I think a lot of the backstory is given to you in these very like palatable, smaller bits. But it does mean that whenever you're reading, it does almost feel like you're reading the start of a novel, because you're learning these fresh things about these characters, almost as if you don't know them. Yet 250 pages in, I feel like I know these characters like the back of my hand, so I feel almost as if the exposition isn't needed. But at the same time, this backstory adds depth and it adds more intrigue, so I can see why it's added. I mean, a lot of it is, I think, needed, to know about the complications in the relationship between two characters. I won't spoil anything, but you need to know that, I guess, in order to understand his actions towards the end when he decides to leave one character and go to another character's side. So it's important stuff to know, but I guess maybe the better criticism is that sometimes the way it comes up feels like it's taking away from what's happening in the present. I'd rather know or want to follow the continuity of the dialogue or the action, or know more about the scene details, than to sort of take a step back and know that this character said this because of the backstory around this. It's almost like in some fight scenes that you might see in like anime or something, and the character stops like mid-punch, or it slows down mid-punch to tell you about the character's motivations and exactly what they're thinking. And in reality, you don't really think in the middle of a fight. This came up in class today, so I'll use it as a good metaphor, but just when you're fighting, you're not having these big opportunities to have these thoughts, and the same way that in the middle of these scenes that are very tense, or the characters are trying to outmaneuver each other, or a lot is being left unspoken, it feels like, yeah, there is conscious things going on, but not to the extent that characters are reaching into the backstory and in a way that is always flooding the conversation. It seems, I guess, in a way it feels more like the author is doing that, like it's coming more out of the author's mind than the characters. So it does sort of pull you out of the action or the dialogue or the scene, because it is sort of like not the character is thinking about this exposition. It's the author who's consciously deciding to give it to you now, because now's the right time for the story, but not necessarily the time that is most natural for the character. So I think maybe a possible remedy to that might be just to synthesize it a little bit, or try to find more natural ways for it to come up. Like I wouldn't mind if the chapters all sort of began more with that expositional tone and gave us some backstory that was going to be relevant for that chapter, and then after that sort of transitioning more into dialogue and action that isn't slowed down at all, as long as it isn't sort of coming up all the time and sort of slowing things down when I'm really gripped by what's happening. So that can possibly help, and maybe also just getting more of these things out a little bit sooner, I think, because part one I was really enjoying learning all these things about the characters. Like by part one, I guess like the first third, and then it got to a point where I felt like I knew them well enough, so that stuff sort of began hitting less hard. So maybe the most important details of that backstory could really be hammered in earlier on, and then we'd have enough to sort of understand why characters behave a certain way, or have a bit more of a foundation, so that in the middle of a tense or interesting scene, not as much needs to be explained, because enough about their family history or their history of abusing a substance, or some other part of their backstory, we already have enough of that in order to just get a little bit more to understand what's going on, not a whole lengthy paragraph, because I wouldn't want to lose that backstory. I think it was one of Li's strengths to give that out in the way she does, that does make you feel like you're getting closer to the character. I just wish it didn't happen to slow down or take me out of the scenes as well. Like if there was a best of both worlds, I would say it would mean that I would still get to know these characters and their histories in this depth, but I would also be able to get to go through the scenes at a fast pace and understand their actions, because I already know about their histories, and I can use that to sort of get to know their behaviors and not be scratching my chin as I read, because I feel like everything's already very reasonable and makes sense given the complications between the characters. So yeah, that being said, I did really like reading, and I did feel like the characters just came through so strongly. So yeah, it was a good read, and one that was very fast despite the instances that sort of slowed it down. So I would definitely recommend giving it a read, and I think this came out at least five years ago, maybe not quite that long, but the first time it was taken out at the library was 2019, so it's been a bit, and it'll be cool to read something more recent from this author and see how her style might have changed in the meantime. So that's all. Thank you for watching.